She could have walked away clean. I gave her a dishonorable discharge. No strings, just behave for a few weeks. But Private Wiggles, she wanted chaos. She lied, stole, vanished, and even tried to take me down with her. So I did what any seasoned commander would do. I buried her with her own mess. I've just taken command of a unit of 80 soldiers stationed in Hawaii. It should have been a smooth transition. Most of them were pros, disciplined, sharp, and motivated to get their work done and head home with a paycheck. Solid people. But every unit has that one outlier, that one name that starts popping up in conversations with a sigh or a groan. I met her official about 3 days after assuming command. We were prepping for a month-long deployment to Thailand for a training exercise, and the clock was ticking. Sergeant Maggie, one of my best platoon sergeants, flagged Wiggles during our readiness check, said she might be unfit to go. Something about a recent outpatient procedure. I didn't have time for vague medical drama, so I went straight to the source. Pulled Wiggles aside and asked, "Are you cleared for this deployment? I need to know now." She gave me this confident shrug and said, "Yeah, I'm good, sir. I can handle it." That was my first mistake, taking her at her word. We landed in Thailand, set up shop on a Thai army base, and within 2 days, my medics were hauling me to the clinic tent. Wiggles was laid out, barely able to move. The PA on duty hit me with a diagnosis that nearly knocked me over. Pelvic inflammatory disease. Not just any case, the worst I've ever seen, he said. And this was a guy who'd patched up soldiers in war zones. So I called her in, gave her the straight talk. "You want to get out of the army? Fine, you've got time left on your contract, but I can start the process. Honorable discharge, no drama. But you've got to meet me halfway, take your meds, show up, and do your job. You follow the rules. I'll fast-track the paperwork when we get back to Hawaii." She nodded. "Yep, I can do that." Spoiler, she absolutely could not do that. From that moment on, it was like she had a checklist titled "How to Torture Your Career." Deb was hunting her down daily just to force her to take pills. Half the time, Wiggles was me. Then she hit us with a bombshell. Accused First Sergeant Bob of sleeping with her. Completely false, and easy to disprove. Bob was STI-free, Wiggles not so much. At first I tried to laugh it off. Maybe she was overwhelmed, maybe she was lashing out, but no, it was calculated. She was playing a game, a dangerous one. And me, I was just starting to realize how far she was willing to go. By the time we returned to Hawaii, I was already rethinking the honorable discharge. But I figured, let's stay the course. Give her one last chance. Get her out clean. You'll walk away with a clean record and a paycheck until you figure things out. All you have to do is show up, follow orders, and keep your nose clean until the process is done. No more drama. Can you do that? Wiggles smiled like she was already halfway out the door. I can do that. I wanted to believe her. I really did. And for about 3 seconds, she almost fooled me. But within the week, the red flags came flapping in like a hurricane. First, she got caught drinking on base. Not just sipping a wine cooler in the barracks. This was full-on party mode, and she was only strike one. Then came the housing scam. Wiggles and her charming husband, let's call him Mr. Wiggles, lied their way into rent-free on-base housing using forged documents. Paperwork so bad it looked like it had been written in crayon. Mr. Wiggle, by the way, was already under investigation for selling drugs to other soldiers. Real power couple, those two. Still, I stayed the course, kept the discharge process moving. Then came the bruises. Wiggles showed up at the clinic with a busted face. Said Mr. Wiggles kicked her while wearing combat boots after she accused him of cheating. She was moonlighting at one of Honolulu's seediest clubs, bringing other soldiers down with her. Add that to the list of offenses. Then came the call from a temp agency. "Hi, is it okay if Wiggles keeps working as a temp downtown?" I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Yeah, while blowing off army responsibilities, she was picking up temp gigs as an admin assistant. Moonlighting, forging papers, stripping, fighting, drinking, vanishing. She was doing everything except the one thing she promised. Behave long enough to get out clean. And through all of it, I kept that file open, still processing her honorable discharge, still trying to give her an exit with dignity. But she wasn't having it. She mistook my mercy for weakness, thought she could wreck the place on her way out and walk away with a smile. That's when I knew it. Wiggles didn't want peace. She wanted attention, she wanted drama, she wanted to burn everything down, assuming we'd hand her a fire extinguisher and a pat on the back. But what she didn't know, I don't hand out extinguishers. By this point, Wiggles was a full-blown hurricane, and I was the guy standing on the shoreline still hoping the sandbags would hold. Every day brought a fresh disaster. Every morning I'd sip my coffee, take a deep breath, and wonder, what did she do this time? And she never disappointed. First, She doubled down on the underage drinking. One weekend she got caught stumbling through the barracks with a bottle of Hypnotic, yelling at the walls like they owed her money. When asked what she was doing, she slurred, "I'm celebrating my freedom." Freedom from what? Exactly. Responsibility? Sobriety? Reality? Then came her full-blown disappearing acts. Not late to formation or overslept, we're talking full-on ghost mode. No one could find her. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and her husband, when you could catch him not high or skimming, claimed he had no idea where she was. She'd vanish for a day, sometimes two, then reappear like nothing happened. One morning Sergeant Deb found her asleep behind a supply shed, curled up next to a duffel bag full of gut. When asked what she was doing there, she yawned and said, "I just needed a break from people." Lady, you're in the army, your people all dead. Her personal drama was now bleeding into my professional world. I had platoon leaders burning hours chasing her down, squad leaders drafting sworn statements, and my inbox was overflowing with incident reports that sounded like rejected soap opera scripts. Then came the big one. We found out she and Mr. Wiggles had committed housing fraud. They'd used forged authorization forms to get into on-base housing they weren't even remotely eligible for. Housing she then barely showed up to, and when she did, it was a crime scene of dysfunction. Screaming matches, broken furniture, and a steady stream of MPs knocking on the door. And Mr. Wiggles, oh, he was a real gem. Not only did he get busted for selling drugs, but he also allegedly threatened a fellow soldier with a stolen bayonet over a poker game. The army had seen enough. They discharged him dishonorably and booked his one-way ticket off the island. Good riddance. But Wiggles was just getting warmed up. She went to the on-base infirmary one day with a bruised face, claimed Mr. Wiggles beat her again. But this time the story had holes. When the MPs arrived, they noticed she had no injuries consistent with her account, and Mr. Wiggles shockingly had bruises, cuts, and a gash across his hand. He claimed she came at him with a knife, after finding texts from another woman. We couldn't prove anything solid, but the MPs quietly told me, "Sir, we don't think she's the victim here. Oh, and let's not forget her side hustle." One of my sergeants came to me in disbelief. "Sir, I saw Wiggles at a strip club in Honolulu. She was dancing. Not only that, she brought another soldier with her. They were both on stage." I stared at him. "Are you sure, sir, she saw me?" Gave me a wave, said, "Don't tell anyone." Then kept dancing. Outstanding. Just what every commander dreams of. Soldiers twerking for tips while dragging others down with them. And yet, despite all this, I still hadn't pulled the plug on her honorable discharge. Not because I was soft, but because I knew what was coming next. I wanted her to burn her own bridges. I wasn't going to shove her off the ledge. I was just watching her light the fuse. The temp job thing was the cherry on top. A random civilian agency called me, polite as can be. Just following up, "Sir, Private Wiggles has been doing some admin work for our client downtown, and we wanted to make sure she's authorized to continue." I almost dropped the phone. She's doing what? Turns out, while dodging formation, violating curfews, drinking underage, and committing fraud, Wiggles was also moonlighting as a temporary secretary downtown. The audacity was Olympic level. At this point, even my most patient leaders were begging me to end it. "Sir, you gave her every chance. She's playing you." They weren't wrong. And truthfully, I wasn't even mad anymore. I was impressed in that morbid, "this train wreck is really committed" kind of way. She wasn't just screwing up, she was doing it with flair. But now I had a choice to make. I could rip up the honorable discharge paperwork and hit her with the full force of military justice, or keep playing the long game. That's when I called legal. We sat down, went over everything, every drunk night, every no-show, every accusation, lie, and forged signature. My JAG officer leaned back in his chair, tapped his pen on the desk and said, "Sir, she meets all 5 criteria for pretrial confinement. She's a danger to others, a flight risk, and a disruption to the unit. If you want her off your base, we can request confinement." I blinked. "Wait, we can put her in the brig." He grinned. "If the magistrate agrees." Yes, that was the moment the tide shifted. She thought she was untouchable. She thought the army was just going to roll over and let her ride off into the sunset with a benefits package and a pity party. But now it was my turn to light a fire. Enough was enough. I'd given her warnings. I'd offered an escape. I'd watched her torch every lifeline like it was a hobby. At this point, she wasn't just a problem, she was a liability, a walking time bomb. And I was done watching the countdown, so I took my JAG officer's advice and prepared for war. There is a legal checklist under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, 5 specific conditions that must be met for a soldier to be confined before trial. Danger to others, flight risk, obstruction of justice, serious misconduct, and disruption to good order and discipline. She ticked every box like it was a damn scavenger hunt. I reviewed every file, every sworn statement, every ridiculous police report. Then I practiced my script. I knew the magistrate would need specific states' incidents, patterns, and I had receipts. At the pretrial meeting, I laid it all out like a prosecutor with a grudge. "Your Honor," I began, "Private Wiggles has repeatedly demonstrated that she is a threat to others. She's assaulted a husband, who's now discharged. She's accused senior leadership of sexual misconduct, false accusations easily disproven. She's evaded formations, broken base regulations, and actively undermined the chain of command." Wiggles, I pasted, all no theatrics, just cold facts. "She's also a flight risk. We've had multiple instances where she's disappeared for days without contact. One time she was found sleeping behind a supply shed. Another time, she was seen clubbing in town when she was listed as a..." I could see the magistrate flipping through the files, nodding slowly. "And most importantly, she's become a constant disruption. Her actions consume unit time, affect morale, and endanger the discipline we're supposed to uphold." The magistrate looked up and said the words I'd been hoping for. "Pretrial confinement is authorized." Boom. We got the green light to lock her up in the Navy brig at Ford Island. One SG Bob and Platoon Sergeant Maggie volunteered to pick her up, said they'd enjoy the drive. They arrived at her on-base housing and knocked on the door. No answer. Oh, they could hear her and Mr. Wiggles going at it loudly, shamelessly. They waited and waited. Eventually, the Wiggles wrapped it up. She took a nice long shower and finally opened the door like it was a Sunday brunch invitation. She didn't even ask where she was going, just grabbed her bag and left. The brig was cold. Literally the first time I walked in for a required welfare check, I almost shivered out of my uniform. But she was in there locked up, quiet as a mouse. The chaos had stopped. For the first time in weeks, my phone wasn't blowing up. No MPs, no lies, no club sightings, nothing. Just silence. Every week, I was required to visit her and ensure she wasn't being mistreated. It felt backwards. I was the guy she tried to sabotage, and now I had to check if she was comfortable. But whatever, I'd played the part. Each time I showed up, she was polite, pleasant, even like she was trying to rebuild the image of poor misunderstood Wiggles. But I wasn't buying the act. Neither was my boss. 3 weeks in, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan decided to tag along on one of these visits. Maybe he thought I'd gotten too emotional about the case. He wanted to see for himself. We walked in, cold air smacking us in the face, and Wiggles launched into a performance. "So I really need to see the dentist," she whined. "One of my fillings is acting up, and the Motrin isn't working." LTC Ryan nodded seriously. He turned to the guard and asked, "Can we get us something stronger than Motrin?" The guard chuckled. "No sir, Motrin's the strongest thing we offer here. And honestly, she has been telling everyone she wants to get her wisdom teeth pulled before she gets kicked out. There's no filling issue. She's been fine." The look on LTC Ryan's face was priceless. From concern to confusion to rage, all in 10 seconds flat. "That bitch lied to me," he muttered as we walked out. "Welcome to my world, sir." Back in the office, my legal counsel advised to pivot. Captain Morgan Wiggles' defense attorney was now asking for a plea deal, and other than honorable discharge and time served in lieu of trial. I wanted to take this to the mat. I wanted that court-martial. I wanted the whole damn system to stamp failure on her records. But my lawyer, he was smarter than my pride. "She's already been in the brig for 3 weeks. That's more time than most get for this level of misconduct. If you push for trial, the magistrate will probably just give her time served anyway. You want closure, not a circus." He was right. I didn't want to keep dragging this out. I didn't want her hanging around any longer. And truth be told, I already had my pound of flesh. She was cold, alone, locked away, disgraced. So I agreed. Oath, discharge, time served, case closed, or so I thought. But Wiggles had one last trick up her sleeve. One more jaw-dropping curveball. She was pregnant, and the next move, it was going to test every ounce of patience I had left. For the first time in months, everything was quiet. No drama, no scandals, no reports of drunken tirades or knife fights or disappearing acts. Wiggles was locked up in the Navy brig on Ford Island, and the silence was nothing short of divine. It felt like someone had hit a giant mute button on the madness. I almost forgot what it was like to come into the office and not be hit with a fresh stack of WTF. I still had responsibilities. Under military law, I was required to perform weekly welfare checks on Wiggles while she was confined. As her commander, I had to ensure the brig staff weren't mistreating her, that she was receiving proper care, and that her rights were protected. Yeah, it felt like a sick joke. The person who set fire to my unit's morale, dragged her fellow soldiers through the mud, and made me question my commitment to human decencies. I had to make sure she was doing okay, but I followed protocol. Each week I walked through those freezing halls. No exaggeration, it was Arctic in there. I don't know what setting they kept the AC on, but it was like they wanted to refrigerate inmates into submission. Wiggles never complained about the cold, never mentioned being uncomfortable. She was polite, always with that fake, syrupy tone like she was trying to rebuild her image. "Good morning, sir, everything's fine, no issues, thank you for checking." I'd nod, smile tightly, and leave. Meanwhile, Captain Morgan, her defense attorney, was still in denial. He hadn't seen the full picture yet. When we first met, I'd warned him genuinely that his client would make his life hell. He laughed it off. "I'm a big boy, Barker. I can handle it." Yeah, about that. Roughly 2 weeks into Wiggles' confinement, Morgan requested a meeting. He floated a deal, dropped the trial in exchange for an other than honorable discharge and time served. Legally, she was already halfway through what the system might have sentenced her to anyway. I considered it. I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. But then my legal counsel broke it down with military precision. "Sir, dragging us to trial gets you what? A worse paper trail for her. Maybe. But she's already out of the unit. Already disgraced. You push this and you look vengeful. Take the oath, cut the anchor and move on." He was right. Again. So I called Morgan, told him I'd agreed to the terms. The relief in his voice was palpable. He sounded like a man who just realized he might not drown after all. But then came the twist. The brig called me one morning with a bombshell. "Sir, we need to notify you that Private Wiggles is pregnant. Per regulations, we can't continue to hold her in confinement. She must be released back to her unit immediately." I nearly dropped the phone. Pregnant. Suddenly I flashed back to the day we picked her up for confinement. The sound of her and Mr. Wiggles reconnecting behind closed doors. She took her sweet time getting ready. Apparently she took even more than that. And now, after all this, after weeks have come, she was about to be dumped back into my unit like a rotten fruit someone forgot in the fridge. I called Morgan immediately. "You said she'd behave. You said she'd keep her head down until the flight. Now she's pregnant and being kicked back to me. Fix this." Morgan sounded rattled. "I had no idea. I swear, she didn't tell me." "Not your fault she got pregnant," I said, "but it will be your fault if she screws up again." Reluctantly, I had her return to our barracks under watch. Restricted movement. No wiggle room, pun very much intended. We had 9 days left until her flight to Carolina. 9 days of keeping her on lockdown. 9 days of praying she didn't pull another stunt that forced us to reprocess the whole circus. Spoiler, she didn't last one. First, she was caught smoking in the barracks. Not the end of the world, but still against regs. Then someone found a half-empty bottle of hypnotic in her room. Again, she was still only 19. Still pregnant. Still completely unbothered by consequences. And then she vanished again. While her platoon sergeant was pulled into an emergency meeting, Wiggles slipped out of the barracks. No one saw her for 24 hours. When she finally came back, she was smug. Didn't even try to explain where she'd been. It was like she was daring us to do something. Around that same time, I got a call from one SG Bob and LT Ricky. They'd gone to collect the rest of Wiggles' personal belongings from her on-base housing so we could ship them to her post-discharge address. They walked in and froze. Inside the door, stacked neatly, stolen body armor, military shoe gear from other soldiers, boxes of live ammunition, a couple smoke grenades, and because this was a Wiggles operation and actual explosive from the range. I answered the phone mid-sip of coffee. "Sir, we've got a problem." I could already feel the migraine. They laid it out for me. The gear was clearly stolen. The setup looked staged, placed like a trap, like Mr. Wiggles, in his final act of genius, was trying to make it look like Wiggles was stockpiling gear for something shady. I paused, then answered the only way I could. "Box it all up. Return the gear to SIF. Drop the explosives in an amnesty box. Pretend you didn't see it, sir. You want to start another investigation? Tie her up here for months. Give her another reason to cry. Mistreatment, LT." Ricky sighed. "No, sir, I don't want that." "Exactly, we're almost out. Don't let her bait us." Wiggles had tried to play the system from every angle, but now the system was closing around her like a vice. Even her last tricks were backfiring. The countdown had started. 9 days until freedom, and every hour, she seemed hell-bent on blowing it all up. We had 9 days to go. 9 days to keep Wiggles quiet, compliant, and out of trouble. That was the deal. The brig had done its job. She was out, but on a tight leash. One misstep, and we could have yanked back the deal. But Wiggles, she doesn't do quiet. She doesn't do rules. She does chaos. After the disappearing act, the smoking, the drinking, she strolled into my office like nothing had happened. Ricky stood to the side, acting as my witness, because at this point I wasn't having any conversation with her without backup. I laid it out clean. Wiggles, you're violating the conditions of your release from the brig. You've been caught smoking in the barracks, drinking underage, and sneaking off without permission. That's 3 strikes. You're skating on thin ice. She leaned back in the chair, arms crossed, and said with maximum sarcasm, yeah, and I've been doing all kinds of drugs too. I stared at her. Be that as it may, I continued, refusing to take the bait. You're also pregnant. You might not care about that, but I do. Most damage to a fetus from alcohol and tobacco happens in the first few weeks, and at the rate you're going, that baby is going to be born dumber than you. She froze. No comeback, no snark, just open-mouthed silence, like a fish out of water. Then without a word she jumped up and bolted out of my office, straight down the hall. LT Ricky followed her. 10 seconds later I heard doors slamming at the far end of the building. She'd run straight into Lieutenant Colonel Ryan's office. My boss. The man who once thought I was being too harsh. Now she was hoping he'd throw me under the bus. But LT Ricky was faster. He got there first and told him exactly what happened. Wiggles started shouting. He called me stupid. He insulted me. LTC. Ryan's eyes narrowed. He wasn't moved. Not anymore. Get Captain Morgan on the phone. Minutes later, he was on the line with Wiggles' attorney, and I could hear the fury down the hall. I warned you. I told you to keep her under control. Fix this, Captain, or I will take it out on your career. Oof. About half an hour later I got a call from Captain Morgan himself. Baka, 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 he began, his voice full of forced concern. I'm absolutely shocked at what I'm hearing. I can't believe the words coming from my client. I mean, shocked, appalled, and dismayed. I smirked. Let me guess, I said. You're also deeply troubled and emotionally disturbed. He paused. Well, yes. I mean, you can't talk to soldiers like that. I knew a lieutenant colonel once who called a soldier stupid and lost her command. I cut in. I explained fetal alcohol syndrome. It's not my fault she takes science personally. There was a beat of silence. Then Morgan asked the real question. What will it take to keep our deal from falling apart? There it was. LTC. Ryan must have chewed him out hard enough to shake the foundation of his JAG career. And now, Mr. This isn't my first rodeo was asking me for mercy, so I gave him an out. You get her on a plane by tomorrow and I won't revoke the deal. He scoffed. That's not possible. Then Friday, pause, I might be able to get her out by Sunday. Fine, Sunday you make it happen. I won't raise hell. To his credit, Morgan pulled every string he could. By Friday he had confirmed travel orders. Wiggles was booked for a Sunday departure to Carolina. I didn't want to leave any room for error, so I printed special orders appointing LT Ricky as her military escort. On Sunday morning, Ricky drove her to the airport. When they got to the desk, the airline called me directly to verify his credentials. Once cleared, Ricky walked her through security and stayed with her at the gate. He didn't leave until the plane was in the air. Some soldiers are hard to lead, others are hard to like, but Wiggles, she was hard to get rid of. Like a cursed object in a horror movie, you have to bury it, bless it, then watch it disappear before you relax. A month later I got a call from military police. Sir, we've got a derelict van in the lot. All 4 tires are slashed. You know anything about a Private Wiggles? I nearly laughed. It was the final act of a car crash that had taken over half a year of my command. And for what? All she had to do was follow instructions, play nice, and she could have walked away with an honorable discharge, full VA benefits, and unemployment. Instead, she got locked in a frozen cell, kicked off an island, lost everything, and left a legacy of nonsense behind. And the best part, I didn't even have to ruin her. She did it to herself. Wiggles' last 72 hours on the island should have been peaceful. Her bags were packed, her flight was booked, and a ride to the airport was secured. All she had to do was sit tight and not screw up. Naturally, she saw that as a challenge. By now the unit had Wiggles fatigue. Her name triggered groans. Her mere presence in the barracks deflated morale. Everyone knew the countdown was on, but everyone also knew it wasn't over until she was 30,000 feet in the air and someone had eyes on the departure board. In those final days, she became more brazen. First, she started strutting around the barracks like a celebrity. She was no longer trying to keep her nose clean, she was trying to soak up as much attention as she could before being banished. Loud conversations on her cell phone about how they did her dirty, late nights stomping through the halls, and more than one incident of music blasting through the walls. The smoking continued. We weren't talking about the occasional cigarette on the porch. Wiggles was lighting up inside her room. When confronted, she laughed and said, "What are they gonna do? Send me back to the brig?" A fair point, and a dangerous mindset. Then, someone spotted her at the PX buying another bottle of liquor. It was a minor miracle she still had an ID that passed muster. She was flaunting her defiance now, flashing it like a badge of honor. Every infraction was a final middle finger to the command that had wronged her. On Saturday night, just hours before her scheduled flight, she pulled one last stunt. We had her confined to barracks. She wasn't allowed to leave, wasn't allowed to have visitors, wasn't allowed to do anything But when her platoon sergeant did a late check, Wiggles was gone. Again. Disappeared. No note, no phone left behind. Just vanished into the night like some bootleg action movie villain escaping the feds. This time, I didn't even get mad. I was past mad. I was in that exhausted headspace where you're too tired to yell and too amused to care. I called LT Ricky status. We're tracking her, sir. She was spotted near the back gate. MPs have her on radar. She'll better be back before wheels up tomorrow. She strolled back in just after 3 a.m., smelling like a mix of club smoke and coconut rum. When asked where she'd been, she rolled her eyes and muttered, "Out." No remorse, no excuses. Just out like this. Was spring break, not a restricted military release. That morning LT Ricky picked her up with the attitude of a man walking a rabid dog across a minefield. He had the paperwork, he had the orders, and most importantly, he had zero tolerance left. When they got to the airport, the airline desk confirmed Ricky's escort credentials and issued him a special gate pass. He stayed next to her like a Secret Service agent with a vendetta. No talking, no breaks, just business. They sat in silence at the gate. Wiggles scrolled on her phone. Ricky watched the clock. When boarding was called, she stood up, turned to him, and muttered, "You people are all gonna regret this." Ricky didn't flinch. "Ma'am, I already regret knowing you." She walked down the jet. Ricky stayed at the gate, arms crossed, until the plane backed away from the terminal and took off. Only then did he exhale and call me, "She's gone." And with that, the storm finally broke. The next week was bliss. Absolute peace. No calls. No incident reports. No MPs knocking on my door at 2 a.m. Just quiet. Focused soldiers doing their jobs without the Wiggles circus sucking all the oxygen out of the building. A few days later, we got our separation documents back stamped and final. Other than honorable, permanent record that would follow her for life. No VA benefits. No unemployment. No GI Bill, just a hard exit and the black mark. We also learned she'd already burned her next bridge. Somewhere between landing in Carolina and crashing on someone's couch. She managed to tick off her new hosts. Rumor had it she showed up drunk to a family cookout and got into a shouting match with her own grandmother. Classic Wick. I sat down with the 2 other soldiers I'd recently helped out of the army. Both had come to me weeks earlier, quietly, respectfully, asking for help ending their contracts. One had personal issues at home. The other simply realized the army wasn't for him. They followed the rules. They worked hard until the paperwork cleared. They left with honor and full benefits. Wiggles, she could have had that too. I gave her the option. I told her what it would take. I laid the path right at her feet. But she wasn't interested in a clean exit. She wanted fireworks. She wanted to flip the table, light the room on fire, and ride the smoke out the window like a cartoon villain. And in the end, she didn't beat the system. She proved it works. One of my old mentors used to say, "Some soldiers want to play fuck-around games. That's fine, but you'd better be ready for the fuck-around prize." Wiggles earned hers, in full, with a bow on top. Wiggles was finally gone. She was thousands of miles away, on another coast, and more importantly, no longer my problem. Her name was off the roster, her file was closed, her bunk was empty. It felt like we'd exorcised a poltergeist, but there was still cleanup to do. Once a soldier leaves, the army, especially under an other than honorable discharge there, has a bureaucratic wake to handle, equipment to be accounted for, housing contracts to be closed, pay corrections to finalize, and in Wiggles' case, a mess of loose ends that all needed tying off before we could truly move on. First was her personal property. What little hadn't been crammed into her duffel bag had been boxed up and labeled by L. Ricky and one SG Bob. They made sure no military equipment was shipped. Everything was civilian clothes, shoes, a few ratty paperback novels, and a cracked hair straightener that looked like it had survived a grenade blast. The boxes were stacked in the admin office, ready to be mailed. I authorized a shipment myself, just to make sure no one tried to toss her junk in the dumpster. I didn't want any reason for her to claim mistreatment or lost property, because even though she was gone, I knew people like her don't disappear quietly. Next came the paperwork. Her OTH discharge meant she was flagged in every system as ineligible for re-enlistment, benefits, or transitional services. No final paycheck from the army, no unemployment claim, No transitional classes, just a boot print on her record and a long list of things she'd never qualify for again. But the real closure came from the silence. My inbox no longer pinged with urgent Wiggles in the subject line. The MPs stopped showing up like exasperated babysitters. My platoon sergeant smiled again. Formation attendance returned to normal. It was like the entire unit had exhaled at once. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. The tension had left with her. And as the days passed, I finally had the time and clarity to reflect. It didn't have to end like this. I thought back to that conversation we had after Thailand, when she said she wanted out, when I said I'd help her, when I laid out the path and promised her a clean slate if she could just follow 3 basic rules. Show up, take your meds, do your job. Simple, easy, generous even. And she threw it away. She mistook kindness for weakness. She thought the system wouldn't touch her. She thought if she cried loud enough and stirred enough drama, she could walk away a victim. But the army isn't built for people like Wig. It's built for order, for structure, for people who understand cause and effect. And while it's not perfect, when it works, it really works. And in this case, it did. Still, I wasn't proud of how it ended. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't spike the football. I'd spent too many hours trying to salvage her career. Too many meetings trying to give her an out. If anything, I was disappointed. Not just in her, but in how often we have to go through this. Because Wiggles wasn't unique. There are always a few soldiers like her. Ones who want the uniform without the responsibility. Who crave attention but not accountability. And while they're rare, when they show up, they drain the life out of everything around them. But that's why people like me wear the rank. It's our job to deal with the chaos, to protect the good soldiers from the bad, to make sure the mission doesn't derail because of one person who refuses to follow the program. And the best part, after it was all over, after the plane had taken off and the last box was mailed, I got 2 messages that reminded me why it was worth it. The first was from LT Arikisar. He wrote, "That was the most exhausting escort duty I've ever had. But watching her plane take off was the best moment of my month. Thanks for trusting me to handle it." The second was from Sergeant Deb. She'd taken a beating in all this. Wiggles had made her life hell. But she sent me a note that simply read, "Thank you for not giving up on discipline. You showed the rest of the unit that it still matters." Those messages meant more than any commendation. Because that's the job, not the medals, not the awards. It's the messy, thankless grind of protecting the standard, of cleaning up when someone sets a fire, and making sure the rest of your people see that yes, actions have consequences, that justice still means something. About a month later, I was in a command staff meeting when an update popped up on my phone. An abandoned van with all 4 tires slashed was towed from the parking lot. The name on the registration, Wiggles, of course. She was gone, but not without leaving one final piece of herself behind, and all I could do was smile. Not because I missed her, but because for the first time in months, I could laugh again. She'd played every card she had. She'd manipulated, accused, vanished, and fought the system tooth and nail. And in the end, she's still lost, because you can only run from consequences for so long before they catch your flight. Looking back, I still shake my head. Not because I regret what happened, but because of how avoidable it all was. Private Wiggles had every opportunity to walk away with dignity. I laid out a roadmap for her, simple and clear. Show up, stay clean, do your job for a few more weeks, and I'd make sure she walked out with an honorable discharge, full benefits, and a clean slate. That's it. But she couldn't do it. She didn't want to. And not because she was incapable. Wiggles was clever in her own chaotic way. She was cunning, manipulative, and persistent as hell. But she was also arrogant. She thought the system was stupid, that the army was soft, that rules were for other people. She thought I would fold. And to be fair, there are plenty of leaders who would have just rubber-stamped this charge and shoved her out the door to avoid the headache. But that's the problem. When we let people like her burn down the house on their way out, we tell everyone else that integrity is optional and accountability is a bluff. I couldn't let that happen, not on my watch, because for every Wiggles, there are 10 good soldiers watching from the sidelines. Soldiers who stayed late without being asked, who carry more than their share, who cover for their battle buddies without expecting a thank you. And if you let someone like Wiggles run wild, you disrespect them. And I'll never do that. Now, I don't believe in revenge for the sake of revenge, but I do believe in justice. I believe that if you dig a hole deep enough, you should be the one to live in it. And Wiggles, she dug a damn crater. All I did was hand her the shovel and keep the paperwork ready. People ask me sometimes if it was worth it. All the hours, all the meeting, all the welfare checks and late-night calls and legal strategy. Yeah. Because even if she didn't learn a thing, everyone else in my unit did. They saw what happens when you test the system long enough. They saw what leadership looks like when it's done right, not with anger, but with consistency. Not with ego, but with resolve. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. I had the truth, I had the law, and I had time. Wiggles thought I was trying to ruin her life. I wasn't. She did that on her own. And that's the true moral of this story. No matter what system you're, military, corporate, sometimes that's a pink slip, and sometimes it has 4 weeks in a frozen brig followed by a lifetime of explaining why your discharge papers are stamped other than honorable. Actions have consequences, and the world doesn't owe you understanding just because you scream the loudest. I think about the 2 other soldiers who came to me quietly, asking for help getting out early. No drama, no lies, just honesty. I worked the same channels for them, got their discharges approved, helped them set up unemployment, connected them with transition services. They left with handshakes and good luck texts. One of them even sent me a postcard months later, thanking me for how I handled it. That could have been what she chose, a different path. So here's what I want anyone listening to remember: whether you're a soldier, a student, a supervisor, or just someone trying to navigate life, you always have a choice, even when it feels like you don't, especially when it feels like you're cornered. You can choose grace. You can choose to follow the rules. You can choose to leave with your head high or go down in flames. And when someone extends a hand and offers you a way out, take it. Don't spit on it. Don't weaponize it. Don't use it as a platform for pity or chaos. Because if you do, there might still be someone on the other end of that rope who knows how to pull harder. Wiggles didn't just fall from grace. She jumped, and the system caught her exactly the way it was supposed to. So if you ever find yourself in a similar position, staring down the barrel of consequences you think you can talk your way out of, just remember this story. And remember what happens when you play fuck around games. You win the fuck around prize. Every single time. Wiggles played the game and lost big. Actions have consequences, and sometimes they come with handcuffs and a boarding pass. If you loved watching karma do its job, hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite moment, and subscribe for more real stories where justice always wins.